Grayson Harper never really let go of a certain girl who'd passed on. 4 years into our marriage, he'd found someone who looked just like her. And me? I was the last person in the entire capital to learn about it. That day, I happened to wear the same red dress as that girl. Grayson frowned and said, "Red doesn't suit you. Go change." But I didn't change the dress. Instead, I decided it was time to change the husband who didn't like seeing me in red. 1. The moment she spotted we were dressed alike, that girl pouted, clearly annoyed. Grayson leaned toward her, whispering softly. The lady, Grace Fletcher, nodded sweetly and walked off. Then Grayson stepped through the clinking glasses and bustling crowd and stopped right in front of me. He stared at me, brows creased. "This red doesn't suit you. Go change." Silence fell across the room, yet everyone couldn't help sneaking glances in my direction. Right then, someone snorted and said, "Ridiculous. A cheap imitation of someone long gone." I looked up. It was his cousin, known to be the closest friend of the very Elena Delacroix he'd never forgotten. When we got engaged, no one mentioned her to me. Grayson had been carrying the memory of a dead woman all along. I didn't find out until I was due with Evan. 4 years of marriage, and he went looking for someone who resembled her. And still, I was the last to know. When I just sat there, not responding, Grayson's tone dipped, his voice harder. "Elizabeth?" I looked past the guests and met his eyes. Maybe he thought it'd be a nice touch for her, so he wore a dark red sash today. My gaze dropped to that slice of color at his waist, and somehow everything around me went completely quiet. Just as he seemed ready to speak again, I stood, pushed the chair back, and headed outside. Grayson's face relaxed a little. "Once you've changed, come right back." I pressed my lips together and even gave him a faint smile, but I didn't say a word. I didn't head to a dressing room. I didn't go back inside. I turned and slipped out through a quiet side door and left. It had looked gloomy when I arrived. Now a light rain drizzled outside, late spring, not cold, even on a rainy night. So I didn't bother with an umbrella, just stepped right into it. When I returned to the estate, a maid ran up to me, beaming. "Madam, Mrs. Harper brought young Master Evan here. They're waiting for you." My heart leapt as I quickened my pace. The first year into the marriage, I had Evan, but Mrs. Harper insisted I was too weak after childbirth to care for him properly. She took him away right after his first month. I was devastated, barely healed, couldn't even summon the strength to go after them. Could only beg Grayson in tears. In the end, I was granted just one visit with Evan every 7 days. I treasured every moment, but time flew by and Evan grew up. Bit by bit, he drifted further from me. As I walked up the steps, I heard laughter from inside. 2. Evan was playing with a finely carved wooden carriage, his movements confident and quick. Servants and maids crowded around, all gushing about how clever he was. I moved closer, gazing at his small, focused frame. He looked up at me just once before going back to plucking away at a pipa. I waited patiently for him to finish, crouched down with open arms, ready to hold him. 3. But instead, he turned and ran straight toward Mrs. Harper. "Grandmother, I saw Mama. Let's go home now." He wrapped himself around her leg, nuzzling into her lap. Mrs. Harper lit up. "My sweet boy, yes, let's go." And there I stood, arms still out, awkward and empty, just holding on to the cold air. I always notice these things too late. Just like earlier tonight, when Grayson humiliated me in front of everyone. I didn't start feeling the sorrow creeping up until I was on the way back to the estate. It wasn't until Mrs. Harper had taken Evan and been gone for a while that I finally crouched down and let the tears fall, quiet and unspoken. There wasn't really much left here for me to hold on to. The night had deepened. I went upstairs, packed a few personal things, all the letters, the private keepsakes. I made sure to take them. Everything else left untouched. As I walked through the courtyard, I caught sight of the crabapple blossoms in the west garden, blurry in the misty rain. I'd planted those myself, the year I married Grayson Harper. I used to love those flowers. But I stood there just for a moment before turning away, not even looking back once. Grayson had been drinking. He was a bit tipsy. He glanced at the incense stick, its flame just about done. Elizabeth had left nearly an hour ago. Just went upstairs for a change of clothes. How could that take this long? His brows furrowed, and he called for a servant to send word. What's she doing? Still not coming? No reply came. Instead, his attendant approached, bowed slightly, and whispered, "Sir, the household help reports Madam has already gone back to the residence." Grayson's face darkened. This was the first time Elizabeth had acted out like this. He truly disliked women being this unreasonable. "Bring Grace here." The servant's heart jumped but answered quickly, "Yes, sir, right away." By the time Grace arrived, she had changed into a sheer gown, her hair loose around her shoulders. It looked like she'd just been crying. Her eyes were red, makeup nearly gone, her face clean and soft like a lotus fresh from water. Grayson stared at her a moment, as though stunned. "Grayson," she began, her voice low, biting her lip, raising her eyes to his. "Was I out of line tonight?" At the corner of her left eye were two faint beauty marks, more visible now without powder. It was the spot that reminded Grayson most of Elena Delacroix. Without a word, he cupped her face gently. Drunk and dazed, he kissed that mark softly, under his breath murmuring, "Elena." It wasn't until 3 days later that he realized Elizabeth hadn't come back after leaving that night. Grayson didn't think much of it, honestly. Elizabeth might have been the youngest daughter of the Lester family, but she wasn't like the others. She had gone missing when she was a child, apparently went through all kinds of hardships. She still had the scars. The Lesters only found her when she was nearly 18. She hadn't attended any girls' schools, didn't have a refined temperament, quiet, timid, the type that wilted easily. No surprise the Lester family didn't favor her much. Grayson's mother wasn't fond of her either. When the wedding was arranged, she made that clear. Said there'd be a ceremony, sure, but she wouldn't be listed in the family records unless she gave them a son. Then I did give birth to Evan, but my mother Harper never brought up the records again. I was too meek, too afraid to ask. When I went home, I'd already been gone for a full month. It was late April. As Grayson stepped out of his carriage, he immediately noticed the crabapple tree in the west garden, its blossoms already fading. A servant, seeing his expression, hurried to explain, "Madam always took care of them herself, never let us intervene." "She still isn't back?" Grayson walked over slowly, his frown deepening. The servant shook his head and quietly said, "She hasn't returned at all, sir." "What day is it today?" he asked suddenly. "The 6th day, sir." "Did you bring Evan back already?" "The 6th, it was the day Elizabeth always came to spend time with Evan. She never missed it." "Yes, sir. He should be arriving any moment." Grayson nodded, his expression returning to its usual calm. "Tell Elizabeth, if she's not back within the hour, Evan's going back to the old house." Evan was sitting on the carpet in the parlor, playing with a new toy. A servant stepped in, cautious and quiet. "Sir, we've sent someone to notify Madam." Grayson gave a low, then glanced toward Evan's face. He looked just like Elizabeth, especially in the eyes. That fan-shaped crease in his eyelids, those thick lashes, his skin was just like Elizabeth's, pale and smooth, like carved jade, a soft and lovely little boy. But the servant didn't leave. After hesitating a moment, he said again, "Madam said she's not coming back." Grayson Harper's head snapped up. The servant shrank back, clearly terrified. Even Evan Harper seemed to sense something was wrong. He quietly set his toy aside. There was a long silence before Grayson gave a cold laugh. Then he stood, calling out to Evan, "Evan, let's head back." Evan got up, but he looked up and asked, "Aren't we waiting for Mother?" "No need." Grayson bent down and picked him up. "She's not coming back?" Evan looked almost happy for a second, though something about his face didn't quite match the joy in his voice. Holding Evan, Grayson walked out of the hall and down the steps. They passed through a hibiscus garden, the leaves half withered with the season. Only then did Grayson speak. Your mother misbehaved, so I won't let her come home for now. This is her punishment." It feels like, ever since I married Grayson Harper, moved into the Harper estate, and gave birth to Evan, this has been the most peaceful time I've had. I don't have to get up at dawn. I don't have to eat pastries every morning just to match Grayson's tastes. I don't keep counting down the days until the 6th of each month to see Evan, only to be left curled up in bed, unable to sleep, heart aching afterward. I don't waste time wondering if Grayson will come home tonight or at what hour. I can sleep in till the sun is high, get up when I want, and cook myself a warm bowl of noodles. I can even stay up reading fiction till deep in the night, sobbing till my sleeves are damp. And when a teacher from Evan's school came to invite me to an event, I did feel a pang. But I looked him in the eye and said calmly, I have no ties with the Harper family anymore. Please don't trouble me with anything related to young Master Evan. Thank you. After the teacher left, I looked at the Harper family messenger, still sending letters regularly every month like clockwork, and frowned. Tomorrow's the usual delivery day, but this time I didn't wait for them. I went to the Harper estate myself. Madam, sir, madam is here. The servant's voice was excited, even hopeful. Grayson's chest tightened slightly, but when he spoke, his tone was cool and distant. Tell her Evan won't be coming out today. The servant paused, clearly surprised, then passed on the message. Moments later, he returned. Madam asks if you could come out and speak with her yourself. Grayson set down the book he had been holding. He looked down, slowly smoothed out the folds in his sleeve, and then held out a hand. Let her in. Elizabeth walked into the inner quarters, a place she knew better than anyone, but now felt like the last place she ever wanted to be. Once the others left, she sat beside him. Her quiet breathing stirred against his ear. Soft and steady, close yet distant. It brushed against something deep inside him. Through the window, he saw the hibiscus garden in bloom. For a moment, a memory flashed, her holding flowers, running toward him, nearly bumping into him. She'd looked so full of life that day, rare for after their marriage. Grayson thought, well, if she's come here on her own, he'd give her a way out. Eliza, do you realize what you've done wrong? Her breathing paused, ever so slightly. Then she spoke, calm and clear. Grayson, we never got added to the Harper family registry 4 years ago. I know. He gave a faint, careless smile. So all this fuss was just her wanting to get formally registered as his wife. To him, it was only a matter of time anyway. Just a small formality. That means if we part ways now, we don't need to go through the whole formal divorce process. Grayson's smile vanished instantly. What did you just say? The hand gripping the letter tightened painfully. Stop sending a letter to me every 7 days, she said. I'm not coming back. I also made things clear with Evan's teacher at the academy. Eliza, what are you trying to say? 6. Grayson Harper, I don't want a share of your fortune, but the 880 taels of silver I received during the marriage, along with all the gold hairpins and jade ornaments, I'm keeping them. Think of them as compensation for me giving birth to Evan. Grayson had lived nearly 30 years, but he'd rarely felt such burning rage. Strangely enough, the more furious he was, the calmer his voice became. Are you really sure about this? I'm sure. Without hesitation, Elizabeth turned and walked out of the Harper residence. The servants nearby didn't even dare breathe too loud. Just moments ago, their master had even smiled a little. They thought things might settle down. Lately, the whole house had been in a strange mood, almost suffocating. But now, with the lady gone, Grayson's face turned downright frightening. Take these letters away, he said as he got up, signaling to the servants. He took a few steps toward the door but stopped when he saw the flowering crabapple tree in the west garden. Felt like he couldn't breathe. He turned and added, Clean out her room. Move all of Elizabeth's things elsewhere. I don't want to see any of it again. The servant startled but quickly bowed and obeyed. Grayson strode off without another word. Behind him, someone came hurrying up, said Miss Grace had sent a message. He just glanced over, but couldn't even bring himself to care. A copy is still just a copy. Grace couldn't compare to Elena. She didn't even come close to Elizabeth. He knew he'd messed up that night. Shouldn't have humiliated her like that. If she was upset, felt wronged, and didn't want to come back, then fine. Let her be. With her stubborn streak, when she gets hurt or runs into trouble out there, she'll come back on her own. Or at least that's what he thought. But after that day, she vanished. No news at all. There was even a time when Evan wasn't feeling well. Mrs. Harper brought him over, hoping Elizabeth would help, since she'd learned so much about caring for sick children after the difficult delivery. But the servant sent to inform her got no reply. No one answered at all. Mrs. Harper was furious. Never seen a mother with such a heart of stone, she snapped. If she's not coming back today, she doesn't need to come back ever again. Whether she's here or not, it makes no difference to the Harper family. With that, she left in a huff, taking Evan with her. Grayson sat back down, saying nothing for a long time. As dusk settled, he finally said, "Prepare the carriage." To the Gann residence. When the carriage reached the Gann's gate, the Yi family seemed surprised but still greeted him respectfully. Seeing his grim face, the couple exchanged glances. Then asked cautiously, did Eliza make a mistake again? They had never paid much attention to the daughter they'd gotten back halfway through her life. 7. Especially since she'd had a child nearing 4 years old and still hadn't gotten a proper marriage certificate. The couple couldn't help but feel bitter. Grayson's hand paused for a heartbeat as he held the tea. Has she been back recently? They looked even more puzzled. No, she hasn't. He gently set the cup down. She hadn't come here. And in the capital, she had nowhere else to go. So just where had Elizabeth disappeared to all this time? Did the two of you have a fight? Mrs. Yi asked more carefully now. Grayson rose to his feet. Just some small disagreement. Then it must have been her fault, Mr. Yi said, his face darkening. I'll go find her right now and give her a proper scolding. Grayson raised his hand to stop them. No need. We'll handle it ourselves. Fair enough. Couples fight, then make up later, Mr. Vat, Yi said with a smile, seeing him off politely. Grayson had already reached the carriage when he suddenly turned back. Do you still have the list of Elizabeth's dowry? Mr. Ye was caught off guard, but quickly lit up. Of course. I've kept it safe. If you need it, I'll fetch it right away. Grayson shook his head. No rush. Keep it for now. If the time comes, let Elizabeth come pick it up herself. That works. She's welcome to get it anytime. The Yi couple beamed as they watched Grayson leave. They had long given up hope on the marriage between Grayson and Elizabeth. In fact, they had mentally prepared for her to be cast aside, replaced by someone else. But now, things seemed to be taking a turn for the better. Grayson clearly had a change of heart. He was considering making it official with Elizabeth. To the Ye family, that was like a blessing from heaven. No one could treat them as merely distant in-laws anymore. I'd been staying in the small town I once lived in as a child for a couple of weeks. I visited many places I had always dreamed of seeing. I've never been one to spend extravagantly, and the money I had with me was more than enough for a lifetime alone. I thought, if I came across a town I liked, I'd buy a small courtyard house and settle down. As a child, I had been sold, adopted, and even stayed in an orphanage. What I'd always wanted most was a home of my own. The Yi family, my birth parents, didn't feel like home. Grayson's mansion never felt like home either. 4 years under the same roof without an official marriage, just an illusion. Now that I'd left it all behind, the only things still tugging at my heart were the flowers I planted myself, and of course, Evan, the son I gave everything for. Still, I knew deep down, Evan belonged with the Harpers. That was where he'd have the best life. Unlike others, I learned early how to say goodbye. So, while I missed him, I didn't let the sorrow drag me under. Besides, everyone seemed much happier after I was gone. Grayson could finally marry the woman he wanted, and even though I never held the proper title, I wasn't going to live nameless and invisible any longer. I finally returned to the small county town where I'd once been taken in as a child. The riverside town was called Sushui. Land was cheap there. I went in thinking I'd get a modest house, ended up getting a small courtyard instead. The people here were kind and simple. It was a world apart from the bustling capital. This ended up being the place where I felt the most at peace, where I had my first real taste of happiness. Sadly, the kind elderly couple who once took me in had already passed away. On the day I signed the deed, I ran into my childhood big brother. Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. Eliza, it's really you? When I was adopted by the Lester family, they called me Eliza. Seeing Michael again was a shock. Total coincidence. I had somehow bought his family's old house. Brother, it's been a long time. I looked at Michael, and suddenly all those warm childhood memories came rushing back. My eyes overflowed before I knew it. You, weren't you already married? He asked gently. He reached out like he used to wipe my tears, but stopped halfway. Your husband? And the child? Didn't they come with you? How have you been these years, Eliza? I heard your birth parents found you. Did they treat you well? I just shook my head. Couldn't get a word out. All I wanted was to finally let the tears fall. It's funny how we humans are Only in front of someone who truly cares for us do we feel safe enough to break down like this. It had been years since I last saw Michael Lester, but as soon as we met again, it was like I'd turned back into little Eliza all over. And he hadn't changed a bit, still the same way he used to carry me when I cried. They didn't treat you right, did they? Michael's eyes turned red. Of course. If they had, you wouldn't be all the way out here, hiding in this quiet place far from the capital. This town's miles away, Eliza. Just how much did they make you suffer? Brother, I tugged lightly at his sleeve. My eyes were puffy from crying, but I couldn't help smiling. I saw the neighbor hanging all kinds of wild greens in the yard. Could you maybe make that noodle soup we used to have as kids? Michael just looked at me for a long time. Then, like he'd done back then, he ruffled my hair and smiled. All right, I'll make it for you. Grayson Harper went to see Grace Fletcher one last time. Back at that palace banquet, she'd been glowing, confident, like a blooming peony. But now, she looked haggard, a shadow of that night. Don't send me more love poems or paintings, he said plainly. There's no need for us to meet again. The house, the carriage, they'll be signed over to you soon. Grayson looked at her. Her dark hair fell like a waterfall, her face bare, looking heartbreakingly fragile. She looked so much like Alina, and yet he felt nothing, not even a ripple. I won't be coming here again, he said quietly before turning to leave. Grace started crying, couldn't hold it in. My lord, I don't get it. Just a while ago, everything was fine between us. You said you liked me. I never did, he cut her off. But you asked me to stay by your side. I have a wife, but you don't even love her, right? Grayson lowered his eyes, his gaze falling on the jade ring worn on his fourth finger. Did he not love her? If he hadn't cared at all, there were 100 ways he could have broken off the engagement. But the very first time he laid eyes on Elizabeth at her family's house, something inside him softened. But she'd always been so quiet, so timid. Most times it was like she wasn't even there, just a faint shadow beside him. But now, after months without her, he suddenly found the silence unsettling. He'd gone out with friends, hit the tea houses, listened to music, met other women, even some who resembled Elena far more than Grace did. But nothing. He didn't feel a thing, not even for Elena anymore. And yet his thoughts kept drifting back to Elizabeth. They'd been married 4 years. Even in private, she still blushed around him, couldn't quite meet his eyes. When she smiled, the corners of her lips creased into twin dimples. She and Evan shared that same fair, delicate complexion. Now that he thought about it, those years together, he hadn't grown tired of her. Not even a little. These past few months, with her gone, he hadn't touched Grace once. Even last night, she'd shown up in his dreams. A dream with more than just talking. Suddenly, Grayson told the coachman, "Stop by the florist on the way." He came out holding a bouquet of red peonies. That evening, he also bought a red bridal robe. Red really did suit Elizabeth, fit her delicate beauty perfectly. He'd made up his mind. He'd take the flowers, the robe, and go ask her to come home. Life had finally settled down for me. After passing the civil exam, Michael was now working in the capital with his peers. He was busy with official duties every day. But come every rest day, he'd take the long trip back to Su Shui just to be with me. The old lady next door often teased me with a warm smile. "Eliza, that Mr. Lester sure is fond of you. That day when you were watering the flowers, he was brewing tea next to you, but he didn't even notice it spilling over." The old lady smiled through the fence, her wrinkles softening with joy. "Eliza, look at Mr. Lester. He's nearly 30 now and still hasn't taken a wife. How about you marry him? When you two used to play house as kids, Michael was always your groom. My brat, he'd sulk every single time. Michael treats me well, even better than when we were little. I may be slow to catch on, but I've been married before. Of course I can tell what he feels for me. Auntie, I have nothing to offer. I haven't read the classics, don't have any real skill. Michael's so exceptional. His future wife ought to be some charming, accomplished lady." I gave a small smile. I thought of how Grayson never once took me to those important gatherings, how the Harpers never accepted me as their own, how I wasn't even allowed to raise my own child. If I'd grown up with my real parents, gotten an education, learned how to stand tall and speak up for myself, maybe that marriage wouldn't have ended so badly. Someone like me might be better off alone. Says who? Michael's voice suddenly came from outside the fence. The sun was setting behind him, and he wore a plain white robe. He looked like something out of a painting, elegant, gentle, and quietly confident. The boy who used to stand silently by my side had grown into a man who could shield someone he loved from the wind and rain. Eliza, you're already good enough. Don't say things like that. Am I really? I looked at him, confused. If I truly was good, then why had my family, my husband, even my child, all turned away from me? Of course you are. Michael stepped through the gate and into the yard. Everyone has their meaning in this world. If they couldn't see it, that's their loss, not yours. Still, it was hard for me to believe. Then Michael started giving me examples, almost like he was talking to a child, trying to prove his point in the simplest way. You care for flowers well. Yours always bloom better than anyone's. You gave old Mrs. Huang those massages, now her back barely hurts anymore. When I was swamped with work, you helped organize my papers, kept everything neat and clear. It saved me a huge headache. If I really started listing all the good things, I could go on for days. Michael smiled, and his mother chuckled. I could probably talk about her for half a day myself. The dark cloud that had been stuck in my chest was suddenly a little lighter. That night, I told Michael for the first time what had happened with Grayson. I told him about Evan, too. He listened in silence, didn't say a word. Later that night, he left for the capital on horseback. As the sound of hooves faded into the distance, I felt strangely calm. These 20-something years of my life, I'd seen too many goodbyes to really feel anything anymore. I didn't fall asleep until near dawn, and even then, it wasn't deep. Then I heard the sound of a horse again. Still half asleep, I dragged myself up. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. And there he was, climbing off his horse. He held something in his hand, coming quickly to my door. Eliza? He kept his voice low to not disturb the neighbors. I rushed to open the door. Brother? Michael stood there, a trace of exhaustion in his brows, but his eyes were as clear as ever. Eliza, this is a marriage agreement. If you're all right with marrying someone a bit older like me, how about we go get married today? Married? Yes, married. He looked right at me, serious as can be. Once we're married, you'll finally have a home, Eliza. That word, home, meant more to me than it ever should have. So what Grayson saw as a formality meant the world to me. But when you're a kid with no home and no one to rely on, the first thing you learn is how to read people. That's why I never once asked him to marry me. It's funny, isn't it? I'd fallen so low, but I still had some pride left. I wouldn't cling to love that wasn't willingly given. Eliza, I was just a kid back then. I didn't have the means to keep you with us. Later, after I left for the capital to take the exams, I kept looking for you, asking around. Then I heard your real parents had found you. I was really happy for you. They were rich beyond measure, and I figured, as their long-lost treasure, you'd be cherished, no doubt. At that time, I was just some poor student. I didn't want to disturb your new life. Michael's eyes were full of sorrow. Had I known they treated you so poorly, I would have taken you back right then. My parents often spoke of you. Right before my mother passed, she called out your name. They may not have wanted you, may not have loved you, but your brother did. Eliza, I never thought I'd marry anyone. But then fate brought you back into my life. His voice suddenly caught, choked with emotion. This time, I won't let you slip away. I don't know when, but tears were streaming down my face. I was kidnapped when I was little, sold off. Then the woman who raised me had a son and no longer wanted me. I got hit a lot, froze in the winter, worked constantly. Michael's parents took me in, cared for me for a few years. Then that woman came back and took me by force, sold me to someone else. That place was hell too, beatings every day. I ended up running away. I spent time in orphanages, shelters, bounced from home to home. It felt like that chaos would never end. I actually considered going back to the Lester family, but I was terrified she'd find me again and sell me off. So I never dared return. I never imagined that Michael had been looking for me all this time. Nor did I expect his mother on her deathbed remembered me, and never, not in my wildest dreams, did I think we'd meet again like this. Maybe Maybe this is what real fate looks like. Everything from my past, with the Harpers of Leaf Hill, it all just led me through one storm so I'd make it safely here today. I was crying, but still looked at Michael and shook my head with a smile. Brother, I'm afraid I can't go with you to the magistrate today. Eliza, I saw the light in Michael's eyes dim a little, and it made my heart ache all over again. I gently held his hand. I haven't told my parents yet. I need to head back to the Yee family first. It'll be just a day's delay. I didn't expect it to go so smoothly. Even more, I didn't think my father and mother would be so kind and warm to me. But those things I longed for so much before, they don't seem to matter anymore. When I spoke to them about the wedding, they smiled and reminded me, after you're married, bring Lord Harper back with you for a feast. I knew they misunderstood. But I didn't bother to clarify. Why stir up trouble? Knowing how they think, if they found out I was marrying a man who couldn't even compare to 1/10 of Lord Harper's wealth, they'd probably die from rage. After leaving the Yee home, I hired a carriage at once. On the way to the post station, a messenger sent by Michael caught up with me. Miss Hui, Master Lester has arrived in the capital. He just stepped off the carriage and asks that you wait. He plans to marry you here. I couldn't help but smile. All right, I'll wait. Then I sent the messenger on his way and quickly said to the driver, Sir, we're not going to the post station anymore. Head to the magistrate's office, and please as fast as you can. The day after I married Michael, he took me to the market and bought all kinds of things. Gold hairpins, jade accessories, silk and satin, and even 2 jewelry boxes. Honestly, I never cared much for those. But Michael said, if others have it, then you should too. We went back to my hometown to visit my parents' graves. Then we held a small feast at the old house. He said once we got back to the capital, he'd throw a proper wedding for me. He even picked out a bright red wedding robe for the feast and insisted I wear it. When I tried it on, I tugged awkwardly at the hem, stepping into the courtyard. It was late spring. The sky was dim and the crabapple trees were still in bloom. I looked at Michael, and for some reason, Grayson's words popped into my head. Do you think red doesn't look good on me? Michael shook his head. He'd always been cautious and respectful, the kind of man who'd ask before even holding my hand. But this time, he suddenly leaned down and kissed me. You, my wife, look stunning. I stood there for a second, then couldn't help but smile. Just when he was about to pull away from that light kiss, I tilted my head up and quietly closed my eyes. Outside the low fence, Grayson stood still. The red peony he held slipped from his hand, petals scattering on the ground. He saw the soft smile on Elizabeth's lips. Those dimples of hers, so beautiful when she smiled, stabbed him right in the heart. The next second, he snapped. He shoved the bamboo gate open. The noise made both Elizabeth and Michael turn around. Grayson? She looked stunned, caught completely off guard. Michael immediately pulled her close, eyes full of caution. Grayson didn't spare him a glance. He just walked up and grabbed Elizabeth's wrist. Come with me. Elizabeth didn't move. She yanked her hand back forcefully. Grayson turned, his eyes darkening. Elizabeth, I'll say it again. Come home with me. Mr. Harper, I told you already. I'm not going back. Didn't you always want a real wedding with me? He pulled out a household registry book from his sleeve. Come home now, and tomorrow I'll marry you properly, grand procession and all. But I'm already married. His mind went blank. It was like something exploded in his ears. What did you just say? I said I'm married, Grayson. I had the wedding with Michael just yesterday. I looked straight at him, and I told my parents yesterday too. Grayson let out a breathless laugh. Eliza, don't forget, you were with me for 4 years. You gave birth to Evan. I haven't forgotten, but let me make one thing clear. We never had a formal wedding. Our marriage was never official. So no, Grayson, I was never truly your wife. You should go back now, and from now on, please look after Evan properly. I turned away from him, refusing to look back. Brother, let's go inside. I'm a little tired. I reached for Michael's hand. He immediately tightened his grip. All right, let's get you some rest. Eliza. Grayson stepped forward again and grabbed my arm. Evan misses you. My throat tightened, eyes stinging immediately. Evan was just over 3. He didn't understand much of anything. Even if we'd never been close, I never blamed him. Some mothers and sons just aren't meant to stay together. You come home with me, and I'll have someone bring Evan back. From now on, the three of us can be together as a family. A bitter ache rose in my chest. I wanted to cry. It all just felt like a cruel joke. So he'd known all along. He knew how badly I missed Evan, knew I'd give anything to have my son with me again. But he just stood there and watched as Mrs. Harper took Evan away. He could have stopped it, but he didn't. And now, when I've given everything up, when I'm finally ready to walk away for good, now he remembers to bring Evan back? So Evan could have come home after all. Turns out, some rules weren't so unbreakable. Grayson Harper, there's no need for this now, I said, yanking my hand out of his grasp. Don't talk to me about any family reunion. That chapter's closed. If Evan misses me, he can come visit. And if your family allows, I'll return to see him as I should. Elizabeth, Evan is your own flesh and blood, he said sharply. You nearly died giving birth to him. Are you really willing to leave him behind? What if I remarry and she mistreats him? I'd never seen Grayson like this before. Even when angry, he was usually composed, distant. But now, his eyes burned, his face twisted into something I barely recognized. He used Evan to control me when our son was born. And now that I'm leaving, he's threatening me with the same thing again. But this time, I'm not afraid of losing anything. Michael taught me something important. He said before I was a wife or a mother, I was me. Those years stole parts of me I didn't even notice, and that wasn't all anyone else's fault either. So now I'm choosing to find myself again. Evan is my son, yes, but he's your child too. From the moment he was a month old, your mother's raised him like her own. I doubt she'd let him suffer under anyone's hand. And if that day really comes, I took a deep breath. Grayson Harper, I'll take it to the court if I must. I swear I'll fight for Evan with everything I've got, whatever it costs me. So you've made up your mind to be with him? I nodded. I have. All this over some red wedding robe? He let out a cold laugh. Elizabeth, everything I gave you in 4 years, how much could he possibly offer in comparison? It's not just about a red robe. I turned to look at Michael. There was heat in his eyes, fury, but there was something else too. Guilt, and so much care it hurt. Grayson, you had the luxury to love many, but my husband sees only me, and I'm enough for him. I've already ended things with Grace. And Elena, she's long in the past too. Elizabeth, whatever else happened, we were married 4 years. I did feel something for you. Even as he said it, Grayson's jaw was tight. Like admitting this to me cost him more pride than he was willing to part with. As if having feelings for someone like me was a favor. Less love, more allowance. But I'm done begging for that kind of love. Dusk was creeping in. The crabapple tree I'd planted stood glowing under the last light, even prettier than the ones in the Harper family garden. Grayson said he'd let go. So had I. 4 years. Long enough to wear love down to nothing. Now I just want something simple. Something steady. Grayson Harper, I once had feelings for you. But that's gone now, just smoke in the wind. Go home, please don't come looking for me again. You should marry someone who matches your knowledge and experience, someone who can stand beside you with pride. Not someone like me, who only knows how to care for flowers and plants. These past 4 years, I held you back. I'm sorry for that, Grayson Harper. I stood there in the night breeze, giving him one last glance. Truth is, he didn't back out of our engagement back then. He still married me, and I was truly grateful. Because back then, every day at the Lesters felt like torture. Grayson took me away from there and gave me a place to breathe. That alone, to the version of me back then, felt like salvation. If he'd broken off the engagement, the Lesters probably would have tossed me aside like some item for sale. Given my past, being sold and traded more than once, it would have been yet another nightmare all over again. So even now, I hope he'll be all right in the years to come. I never wanted to turn into enemies with Evan's father. If we could end things peacefully, that's all I could ever ask for. Elizabeth and Michael's wedding was nothing short of grand. Considering Michael's wealth at the time, the cost must have been tremendous. But he didn't mind, not one bit. People only praised him for being hopelessly in love. I cried at the wedding, harder than I ever did marrying Grayson. I said, "My name is Elizabeth. It sounds sweet enough, but the first half of my life, It was nothing but bitter. And now, I'm grateful to my husband. Grayson must have found those words hard to hear. He probably thought he'd done enough in those 4 years of marriage. Men taking mistresses? It's been going on forever, hasn't it? What rich young master didn't have a few women on the side? He only made one mistake with Grace Fletcher, and he got over her pretty quickly. Other than that, he figured he'd kept himself mostly clean. He never believed Michael could actually stay loyal. Men cheat when they're broke, so how could one stay faithful after striking it rich? He even spread a few rumors himself. The bigger Michael's business grew, the more money he pulled in, the more temptations that came his way. Grayson figured, with how I am, I'd never tolerate that. If I ended things with Michael, he could swoop back in with Evan, and maybe I'd come back to them. But then, 10 years passed in a flash. Michael never slipped, not once. Elizabeth had a daughter with him, a little girl who looked exactly like her. I couldn't help the jealousy burning inside me. Evan got older, looking more and more like me. Sure, all Harpers were good looking, but having nothing but blood as connection, it wasn't a blessing. Still, Elizabeth and Evan grew close. Blood ties. They're nothing like the dramatic revenge tales in old books. Evan would often visit and stay a few days with her. Elizabeth naturally let him bring his sister along too. The bond between the two kids ended up deep and genuine. People envied it. Now and then, Elizabeth would drop by to see Evan at the estate. When she'd sit and talk with him privately, I'd find myself walking in the garden, tending to the plants. Every time I wanted to walk her out myself. But Michael? He always came to fetch her personally, watching me like a hawk. Still, maybe that's for the best. Having seen what I once did, he at least won't make the same mistake so many men fall into. And that means Elizabeth, she gets to hold on to this sweet, peaceful life.